Good morning to you all. Good to see you again. I hope you got something out of the last couple of sessions with Walter on environmental. This morning we carry on with our health, safety and environmental unit, and the topic is asbestos. We're fortunate this morning to have Stephen from G&L Consultancy. I'll let Stephen introduce himself in a moment, but Stephen's going to take you through this. I'm going to stay on the session this morning. So if you have any questions, Steve will be happy to take them at the end of the session. Also, because I'm on with him this morning as well, feel free to use the chat function as well. So if there's something that you want to ask during the session, just so that we remember it, just type it in the chat box, either to me or to public, and I'll make sure I pass those on to Stephen as soon as we're finished. A little bit of admin as well. Obviously, we are back next week, next Wednesday, back for me again. The final session before Christmas for the penultimate health, safety and environmental session. Also, thank you to those of you who have already submitted your first practice assignment. Well done. For the rest of you who might be panicking when I say that, don't remember the hand-in date isn't until after Christmas. So if you've handed it in, fantastic. I might get a chance to have a look at it this side of the holidays, but I've set aside a day in early January to go through those, and then I'll be contacting people for one-to-ones to give you feedback on that. So if you're working on that over the holidays or early in the new year, don't be afraid to get it into me. So I'll now pass you over to Stephen, who'll be taking you through for the next hour on asbestos. So Stephen, over to you.
How's it going, lads? My name's Stephen Comiskey, as Roger said. I'm working for G&L Consultancy here in Banbridge in Northern Ireland. This morning we're going to have a look at some asbestos awareness, basically hopefully filling you in on all the blanks that you'll need for your assignments, etc. As Roger says, if there's anything you want to ask, just pop it into the chat box and we'll try and get back to those at the end. We've got 1 hour to get through this, so it's going to be pretty tight with time. So if you could kind of just leave them to the end, and if you want to even stay on after, I can answer them or whatever. I'm just going to get the PowerPoint on the screen. If you give me 1 second, then we'll get started. Okay, is everybody able to see that okay? Yeah? Yep, lovely. Okay, we will make a start, folks. So as I said, I'm Stephen. I work as an air tester. I also do surveying and training at G&L Consultancy. So yeah, working with all aspects of asbestos. So as I said, if there's anything you need to know or want to know specific or anything, let me know and we can touch on those at the end. So the things we're going to look at this morning, guys, are an introduction to asbestos, what it is, where it comes from, how it was taken out of the ground, etc. The health effects of asbestos, what's it doing inside our bodies and our lungs, etc. The legislation, we're going to look at the law and the approved codes of practice surrounding the asbestos industry. We'll then look at asbestos containing materials. So we're going to look at all our types of asbestos. So we will look at the licensable materials, the likes of your lagans and your spray coatings, etc. And then we'll work down to our lower risk products, the likes of your cements, bitumens and things like that, things that you may be a bit more familiar with. We'll then look at emergency procedures, basically what to do if something goes wrong while you're out on site. And then the last one we'll touch on is avoiding the risks of asbestos. So just to make a start, what is asbestos? Asbestos is basically a naturally occurring mineral that forms in riverbeds, etc., and over years of metamorphic pressure turns into a rock. So in the rock, in the veins of the rock, as we call it, this is where the asbestos forms. There are 2 different types of fiber. Again, we'll look at those in a wee second. But as I said, it forms in rock and it's then extracted from that rock and made into the various products that we know of today. So they say there's anywhere between 3,500 and 4,000 products that it was made into. So again, we're going to look at a lot of the familiar ones. You'll see a few unfamiliar ones as we go out through the session. So these are just a few photos of basically the asbestos forming in its rock. Okay, so its definition by Google, 1 second, I just move this camera. So it's a heat-resistant fibrous silicate mineral that can be woven into fabrics used in fire-resistant and insulating materials. So two of the key words there would be fire-resistant and insulating, two of its key properties. We will again look at the properties in a second or so. A brief history, how it was used, etc. It was used as, by the Finnish. They were using it 4,500 years ago. They were using it to strengthen pots and cooking utensils. So again, one of the key features of asbestos is strength, tensile strength. So again, the Finnish were using it for their pots, cooking utensils, etc. The Greeks used it in their clothing and lamp wicks. In medieval times, it was used extensively as insulation in suits of armor. And the Industrial Revolution represented a huge boom for the industry. Factories were opening everywhere, and new uses for the miracle mineral were being devised on a regular basis. So as we said, up on 3,500 to 4,000 products it was made into. It wasn't until the late 1880s that asbestos was mined commercially in Canada, closely followed by Russia and Africa. So three of the main countries responsible for taking it out of the ground were these three guys, so the Canadians, the Russians, and the Africa. Russians are still taking it out of the ground. We'll briefly touch on that in a wee second as well. So the Russians are still one of the major operations in taking crystallite white asbestos out of the ground in 2020. In the UK, the commercial use of asbestos began around the end of the 19th century, and it increased rapidly after World War II. So obviously there was a lot of destruction, etc. after the war. It was a readily made available mineral product, and it was cheap. Cheap being probably the key word as to why it was used. It was readily available and it was very, very cheap. The greatest use of asbestos was from around the 50s to the 80s, especially in system-built housing. So in any of you guys that are in Northern Ireland housing executive, etc., the guys over in England, social housing. So a lot of those houses were constructed using asbestos. And today in 2020, even when we're out surveying, there is still a hell of a lot of it in those properties. A lot of people seem to think that we're in 2020 now, the majority of it is gone. Definitely not. There's still a lot of it out there being managed, removed, etc. on a daily basis. Other places it was likely to be installed would have been older buildings, factories and schools. Any government funded building, there's usually a lot of it in there. Yeah, and older factories and schools. So I'm sure you have had some experience in any of those areas with regards to asbestos. So in terms of time frame, that 30-year period of the 50s through to the 80s was when the majority of it was installed. 85 and 99, which we'll touch on in a while, there was bans brought in the UK, so the installation of that severely reduced. So basically any building or any factory, school, whatever you're working in that was constructed between that period, there's a strong likelihood that asbestos was used. So here are three types, are crystallite, the top one, amosite and chrysotile. So we'll start with crystallite. It is our blue type. Again, you don't need to write any of this down yet. If you want, you can write it down in a second. There was 50,000 tons of crystallite installed, mainly as thermal and spread installations. So spread installations to undersides of roofs, etc., factories, pipe lagging, all of that kind of stuff. 500,000 tons of amosite, which was our brown asbestos, and mainly as insulating board, so AIB, thermal and also spread installations. As you can see, there's a significant amount, larger amount of chrysotile installed, so it would have been the most popular type of asbestos installed in the UK. So you can see 2.7 million tons of it, mainly in cement products, the likes of your roof sheets, your gutters, your downpipes, all of those things. So large kind of areas to fill, hence why there was a lot more of it used. So there was 2.7 million tons of chrysotile. So this is just a few photos, guys. It's to basically paint the picture of how it was taken from the ground and made into the products we know today. So as you can see, this is a mine in Canada. Guys, basically manual picks, no masks, no suits, no nothing. Basically no understanding of what they were taking out of the rock. So this rock was passed, oh, we're missing a few photos, apologies. So The photos that were supposed to be inside this was a little guy. He would have took the rock and he basically broke the rock, taking the clumps of asbestos ore. That was then processed, usually with a pestle and mortar, to break it up into powder and dust. And then, as you can see here, this was the end product before it got shipped around the world. So this was in 1936. Basically, these guys were filling Hessian sacks or bags full of loose, raw asbestos to be transported around the world. So some of the things that asbestos was used for, here are a few adverts from 70s and 80s, etc. So this was Kent Cigarettes, who promoted their cigarette as a healthier cigarette to smoke. The reason they stated that was because of this. So in their filter, they basically used blue asbestos, the most dangerous of the three, Crystallite as a filtering agent. So that filtering agent was there to take out your bad tar, nicotine, whatever other dirty chemicals are in cigarettes. So little did they know they were basically breathing in a class 1 carcinogen in blue asbestos. So thankfully those aren't around today. Other things that it was used for, you can see on the left hand side we have got some toothpaste. It was installed in toothpaste. On the right hand side we have got artificial snow. So we're coming into that time of year, Christmas time. You decorate your Christmas tree. Back in the day, it basically was boxes of 100% white Crystallite asbestos. That was there to basically replicate the image of snow. So it's also appeared on the telly a few times. You can see it's appeared in The Simpsons a few times. There's Bart talking about not being certified to remove it. Famous movies that has appeared in, top left, we have The Wizard of Oz. So all of that snow scene is basically made using 100% Crystallite white asbestos. So it was that stuff there in the box on the right hand side that was used to create that snow scene. Famous movie. Bottom left we have The World's Fastest Indian. Don't know if any of you guys have seen it. Very good movie, I would recommend. He basically was trying to break the world land speed record in his motorbike or trike or whatever it's called. And he wrapped his legs basically in an asbestos blanket. If it were to go on fire, it was going to protect his legs. And then a famous series of movies on the right-hand side, you can see the corrugated asbestos sheeting. That was Star Wars. Star Wars used quite a lot of asbestos in their filming due to stunts, fire stunts, etc. Due to its properties, they used quite a lot of asbestos sheeting to do their stunts. So the three main types of asbestos, guys, if you want to write this down, this is probably one of the most important things. You can take away the names and the types. So feel free to make notes if you want, or you don't have to, obviously. Number one is Crystallite. So that is our white asbestos. So that is the one that we referred to at the start as being the most popular, the most likely that you're going to come up against. Amosite, which is our brown asbestos, also referred to as asbestos granularite, but mainly you're going to hear it as amosite, so brown asbestos. And the third one is our Crystallite. So Crystallite, as we talked earlier, in terms of risk, is the most dangerous. I'll explain why in a little second. We'll look more in detail of the three. So Crystallite, white asbestos, amosite, our brown asbestos, and Crystallite is our blue. So Roger had said that there's a chance that there may be an asbestos type question comes up on your examination or coursework. There's maybe a good chance that they may simply ask you something to do with the colors. So that's what you can take from that slide. So this is our Crystallite white asbestos. So you can see it is wavy in appearance. The fibers on the right-hand side are wavy and flexible. So it would have been this stuff that would have been used a lot of the time to make any clothing products. The reason being that Crystallite can be easily woven into fabrics. So you could weave it in to make the likes of oven gloves. They used to make firemen suits from these, etc. Crystallite also with the likes of your roof sheets. I know a lot of you guys are contractors, so I'm sure you've come up against corrugated roof sheets before, gutters, downpipes. This would be the main type of asbestos in those. Okay, middle is our amosite. So this is our brown asbestos. So different in appearance, obviously color-wise. As we can see on the right side, you can see a section under a microscope. The main difference between our Crystallite fibers, you can see, is these are wavy fibers. with amosite, as you can see, they're straight needle-like fibers. So therefore, when you breathe those in, they're way more dangerous. They're basically piercing into the lining of your lungs and your alveoli, creating scar tissue. So in terms of risk, amosite is higher than our Crystallite. And our blue asbestos, as we said, we've touched on, the most dangerous of the three. The reason being, it's similar to, it's an amphibole fiber, so therefore it's a straight fiber like our amosite. The difference with our Crystallite, and hence why it is the most dangerous of the three, is due to its makeup. There are barbs that are basically, I can maybe show you in a drawing, apologies of my drawing. So I kind of hold it up like so. So straight fibers on the end of it, they have got barbs. So think of it nearly like a fishing hook. When those are breathed in, they're basically clamping on to the lining of your lungs and the inside of your lungs, and it's virtually impossible for your body to expel them. So in terms of risk, that is why our Crystallite is considered the most dangerous. It is highly concentrated usually in its products, and then the makeup of that fiber, it's very, very dangerous once inhaled. So moving on to our properties. So we touched on a few at the start. We talked about fire resistant. We also talked about cost. So the main reason why it was used, guys, was thermal insulation. It was really good for thermal insulation. It's stable at high temperatures, used a lot of time for fire protection. Also considered a good electrical insulator. It's moisture retardant. It was resistant to chemical attack. Does not degrade easily. It's got good acoustic properties, and it also had frictional resistance. So a lot of properties there, a lot of things that it was useful for. Hence why it was used to be called the miracle mineral. A lot of people would have called it the miracle mineral. Basically, it ticked a lot of boxes in terms of properties. One that hasn't appeared on that, and I've already touched on it, was cost. So like most things, even today in 2020, a lot of things come down to cost. So that would have been predominantly the main reason. But in terms of physical, actual properties, these were the ones that were why it was used. So ban dates, guys, touch briefly on that as we were introducing there. So our Crystallite, it was banned in 1999. So the final ban date for Crystallite use within the UK was 1999. That was the last time that you could install asbestos. The amosite and Crystallite was banned first. So you can see 14 years before Crystallite. So due to risk, they basically banned, prohibited the use of amosite and Crystallite first. So in 1985, you could no longer use that. Any property constructed between 85 and 99, in theory, should not have any of those installed. Obviously, after 1999, there should be no asbestos installed. There are some exceptions, guys. Just pay attention if you get a year 2000 property that was constructed in 2000. Be sure to check that there is no asbestos in those buildings. The reason being, once it was banned in 1999, the government basically gave a 1 year, to get rid of all the previous stock that contractors had. So they were basically given a Bible to get rid of all that stuff. So the odd, very, very small amount, the odd property year 2000 could have asbestos. But if you're ever asked when asbestos was banned, it was prohibited in 1999. So moving on to health effects, we're going to look at the 4 main diseases linked with asbestos exposure, okay? So general overview, asbestos-related diseases will kill more than 5,500 people each year in the UK. These diseases can take anywhere between 15 and 60 years to develop. So if you get a huge exposure to asbestos, you're not going to come down with one of these diseases in less than 15 years. So anywhere between 15 and 60 years for these diseases to develop. So that's why we stress the importance of ensuring that you're doing everything while we're all young and healthy and fit, because it's unfortunately going to be later life where this catches up with you. So current deaths are from first exposures that happened in between the 50s and the 80s. Number of deaths are expected to rise annually. So if we say it was banned in 1999, we'll say 2000. So up to 2060, there's potentially going to be a rise of deaths. Hopefully, as we get towards that date, that number will start to come down, but there is expected to be an annual rise up until that date. So who is at risk now? I'm sure you guys all come from different kind of industries. Demo workers, construction workers, electricians, plumbers, gas fitters, plasterers, roofers. Basically what we're trying to say, anybody that is potentially going to disturb the fabric of a building. So I'm sure you guys all fall into one of those categories. Personally, I would say plumbers and electricians are probably most at risk, considering they're around boards, they're around pipework a lot of the time, they're in boiler rooms, they're in roof voids, etc. So in terms of risk, probably plumbers and electricians are high up on that list. But yeah, pretty much anybody that's potentially going to disturb the fabric of that building. So asbestos fibers are a particular problem because of three things. We cannot with our eyes see an asbestos fiber floating around in the air. So the only way of detecting that is through regular air monitoring. So companies can go out with air monitoring pumps. They basically install pumps around your work area to ensure that that fiber is not spreading out of your controlled area. The second one is the ability of fibers to split into finer fibers. So the ability of an asbestos fiber, if we say that's our asbestos fiber, it's always going to split down this way. So one fiber can potentially come 2, 4, 8, etc., and they have the ability to spread. So that's another problem we have with it. And the third problem is its resistance to chemical attack. So once that is inhaled into your breathing system, your respiratory system, sorry, the chemicals within the body trying to dislodge those fibers are basically worthless, and that fiber will remain lodged in your body. So a lot of people will ask, is there anything you can do once it's inhaled? Unfortunately not. Once it's in there, it's basically lodged, and yeah, there's no way of the body to get rid of it. So to give you a kind of an idea of how small this stuff is, a human hair, we say, is anywhere in and around 100 microns in size. So you're talking fractions of centimeters here. So to visualize that, respirable dust in which fiber or asbestos fiber comes into is 4 microns in size. So basically there's no way of us detecting it in the air without air monitoring. So the likelihood of contracting a disease will depend on 3 factors. So the concentration of which asbestos you're exposed to. So in terms of risk, we have a chart here. So we're going to look in a second from right at the top of our chart right down to the bottom. So in terms of really dangerous high risk products, working down our risk. So depending on the concentration you're exposed to, the likelihood of you contracting that will be a lot faster in some instances. So if you're exposed to the likes of an AIB board that's broken or smashed, or some spread insulation versus the likes of a small piece of asbestos or cement broke, there's quite a difference in terms of risk and how likely you are to pick up a disease from that. Obviously, with the licensable products, there's more concentration of asbestos, and usually the brown and the blue, the more dangerous type. So therefore, the likelihood of you picking up one of those diseases is a lot faster. The duration of exposure, so how often are you being exposed? Some people could be getting into a workplace every day with asbestos in it. They don't realize that they're being exposed to a small amount every day. So that could factor in if you're being exposed on a daily basis, maybe every other day, versus maybe once a month. So depending on how often you're being exposed to it will depend on the disease. And then your individual immune system and body will also come into effect. So those 3 things combined, guys, will depend on how quick you end up getting one of these diseases. So apologies on this, is kind of overlapped, apologies. So on the left-hand side, you can see the lungs. We have our pleura, which is the lining around the lungs. It will get affected and will eventually lead to a disease called pleural plaques, which we'll look at in a second. The other issues we have is lung cancers, so tumors growing in the lungs. And as you can see at the bottom on the left-hand side is our alveoli. So that is responsible for our gas exchange, where our oxygen and carbon dioxide merges to give us energy. Once that, as you can see, sorry on this overlapping picture, by the way, guys, on the right-hand side, you can see a blown up version of the alveoli. as you can see at the top, scar tissue is forming due to asbestos fiber being lodged in there. The knock-on effect will be lack of oxygen getting pumped around the body. Okay, so that's just a brief overview visually. So asbestosis, we will look at first. So this is to do with scarring of the lung tissue. This scarring impairs the elasticity, so essentially the stretchiness of those lungs, and hampers the ability to exchange blood gases, therefore creating inadequate oxygen levels within the blood. Symptoms will be shortness of breath and coughing. It's usually diagnosed by a patient's history, specifically having been exposed to asbestos. So as you can see, here is a scan of a set of lungs with asbestosis. So you can see on the left-hand side, we've got a healthy functioning lung. On the right-hand side, we basically have this whole core section of the bottom of the lung is severely restricted. That is down to the elasticity, so essentially that stretchiness we talked about, and the lack of oxygen being pumped around that lung. So that is what an asbestosis case will look like. Lung cancer. Lung cancers caused by asbestos are indistinguishable from those caused by smoking or other agents. However, the effects of smoking and asbestos have made lung cancer the most common type of cancer to cause death in the population as a whole. Smoking and asbestos exposure multiply the effects on the lungs, and in doing so, the likelihood of contracting a lung cancer. So you can see, like any other cancer, guys, it's a cancerous tumor. It's the ability to grow through surrounding tissue. It's got the ability to spread throughout the body. So as you can see, the tumor on the right-hand side of that image. Okay. Our next one is our mesothelioma. So mesotheliomas are cancers of the pleura. So the pleura is that area we seen in the image at the start, the lining around your lungs. And then the peritoneum, which is the lining around your abdominal cavity. They largely only form after exposure to asbestos. So this one has got a direct link with asbestos exposure. The delay between first exposure and effect is longer in mesotheliomas than for other cancers, but possibly never less than 10 years. As with lung cancer, increased exposures increase the likelihood of developing a cancer, but not the speed at which it develops. So as you can see on the left-hand side, we have our mesothelial tissue surrounding the lungs. As you can see, that's all intact. We have got an affected lung, a diseased lung on the right-hand side. So what happens is that basically fiber gets lodged in that mesothelial tissue, and what it does, it basically suffocates the lung. So it's not directly the lung getting affected, it's the mesothelial tissue. What it does, it fills with fluid, and what it'll do, it'll suffocate the lung. Okay. Okay, so apologies guys, pleural plaques. I will just talk through pleural plaques. For some reason it's not on this spread or slideshow. So pleural plaques is our non-fatal disease. So it's the fourth of our diseases. 3 we've looked at there are fatal. Pleural plaques is one of those ones, unfortunately, I'm sure you've heard this word a lot in the last 7 or 8 months, asymptomatic. So asymptomatic, as most of you probably know by this stage, is somebody that can have that disease, but they're showing no symptoms at all. So with pleural plaques, it's an attack on the pleura, which is the same on this. And basically fiber will get lodged. There is no symptoms, so you're not going to get your tight chest, you're not going to get your lack of oxygen, etc. Unfortunately, with that one, it could take you to go and get a scan, say of your chest or your back, for another issue, and that could be detected in there. So it calcified pleural plaques, it basically calcifies around the outside of your lungs. Okay, so that's our 4 diseases, guys. We moved really quick through that. I'm kind of paranoid about time here, so we're 30 minutes in. So again, if there's any issues or any questions on any of that health stuff, I have kind of winged through it. Feel free to drop them into the chat box and we'll go over those at the end. So legislation. So we in the north of Ireland have our Health and Safety at Work Order. So that was formed in 78. In England, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 74. So as we all know, the Health and Safety at Work Act is our law basically in the workplace in the UK. So basically it's the set of laws in which all workplaces need to follow. Below that, we have, just before we get the regulations, we have our approved codes of practice. So within our approved codes of practice, it's not law, it's basically guidance to adhere to the health and safety at work. Below that, we have all our sets of regulations. So I'm sure all you guys are working out on sites, you're doing various things. So every industry will have its set of regulations, whether it's scaffolding, working at height regulations, everything down to manual handling regulations. I'm sure if there's electricians, sparks in there, yeah, you're all going to have your sets of rules that we must follow. So in the asbestos industry, we have what is called CAR 2012. So that is the Control of Asbestos Regulations 2012. So basically that's our sets of rules within our industry to which we must follow. So we'll have a quick look at those. And just move this screen. So these regulations require employers to protect employees and anyone else who may be affected by asbestos. So the employer must reduce the risk of exposure, and it is up to all employees to cooperate. Okay, so we're going to look at the key regulations. There are over 20 odd regulations, guys, but we've kind of summarized them into the most important ones that are going to be applicable to you guys. Okay, so Regulation 4. So, Regulation 4 is the duty to manage asbestos in non-domestic premises. So these are aimed at owners and occupiers of non-domestic premises who have maintenance and repair responsibilities for those premises. They have a duty to assess them for the presence of asbestos and the condition of that asbestos. So basically, really briefly, guys, we will take Tesco's Banbridge just as an example. So Tesco's Banbridge, the person in that building responsible for maintenance and repair, it's usually the health and safety person or the premises manager. Basically, it's up to them if they have asbestos in that building that once a year they must get a management survey done. That will be checking the condition of the asbestos, and then the asbestos surveying company will basically give you recommended actions on what to do, whether it needs removed, whether it needs encapsulated, whether it needs repaired, or the one thing clients want to hear, that everything is looking good, it's in good condition, and basically come back in a year's time and check it. So that's a management survey. Refurb and survey must be done for any refurbishment works that could potentially affect the asbestos. So if we go back to Tesco's again, if they were getting a new air conditioning system installed, for example, all the areas that are going to be affected or potentially drilled through, cut, etc., must be checked for asbestos. So that's our second survey, that's our refurb survey. And our third survey is our demo survey. So if a building is being demolished, a thorough, intensive demolition survey must be done to basically find all the hidden asbestos that isn't visible to the eye. And that must be removed before the demo guys can come in and drop the building. So that's our 3 surveys. So management must be done every 12 months. A refurb survey must be done for any works that's potentially going to disturb the fabric of the building. And the demo survey must be done before that building gets demolished. Right, we're going to look or talk briefly on plans of work. So some people will ask, must a plan of work be done for any asbestos work? The simple answer, guys, is yes. So every time you're potentially going to be disturbing, cutting, drilling through asbestos, there must be a RAMS done before. So obviously a RAMS is a risk assessment, must be done prior to, and that risk assessment basically makes up your plan of work. So everything from who's going to be involved, where the actual work is, what controls you're going to be putting in place for potentially others that are working in the close vicinity, what controls the operatives are going to be wearing, whether it's a half mask or a full face mask, the suits, if it's a licensable job, you're talking about where the location of the shower unit is. So it's a pretty important document that must be followed from start to finish. That will end usually with where the waste is being stored on site, where it's going to be transported to dispose of that waste. So all of those details must be prepared in advance, must be prepared before work starts. Employees are to be aware of and follow its content. So like all of you guys are going to be familiar with plans of work. it's ensuring that the employees that are actually going to be doing the physical labor must be aware of its content and basically understand what it's going to be doing on that specific job. So licensing of work with asbestos, guys, I'll briefly put this just up in front of us again. So on our chart, we have our red licensable materials, and then we have our non-licensed materials, and then we have a section in the middle with our notifiable non-licensed. So this slide is basically telling us that any company that is looking to remove licensed asbestos, i.e. your pipe lagging, your spray coatings, they must have a license to do so. Okay, so that can be done through the HSE. You need to meet with the HSE and basically have a meeting with them, go through everything, all your standard working procedures, etc. And then if you're successful, they will grant you with a license. That license is usually 1 year. If in that year everything goes as planned, they will usually grant you a 3-year license to remove that asbestos. So that is everything to do with licensing. Remember, if you're ever considering doing licensable work, ensure that you have your license prior to doing so. Right, Regulation 10 is all to do with information, instruction, and training. So hence why you're sitting here today, listen to me. So every employer must ensure that information, instruction, and training is given to all employees who are liable to be exposed to asbestos. So remember, guys, what we're doing this morning is asbestos awareness. So this isn't going to allow you to go out and remove asbestos. You need specific training to do that. So this is an awareness. So basically, it's to show you what it is, where it came from, the importance of doing things right, following regulations, etc. So if you ever decided to remove asbestos, you must do one of the following courses. So it's a licensed course. That's usually a 3-day course. Our non-licensed is a 1-day course. We go through all of the guidance and approved codes of practice. There's practical elements, how to bag waste. There's how to personally decontaminate, and all of the modules included in that will allow you to basically remove non-licensed asbestos by the book. And then the last one is our awareness of what we're doing this morning, basically. Regulation 11, very important one, is the prevention or reduction of exposure to asbestos. The most important thing when we're removing asbestos is to ensure that others are not being affected or exposed to that asbestos during that works. So the only way of doing that and proving to maybe a client is through air monitoring. So importance of getting air monitoring checked, basically evidence for you to pass on to your client that nobody has been exposed above the control limits, etc. Choosing the suitable work methods is highly, highly important within asbestos works. Correct use of Rpe and Ppe. So I briefly touched on it. We have 2 types of masks. We have our full face respirators with an assigned protection factor of 40, usually used within the licensable jobs, so the more dangerous jobs. And then we have a half mask with an assigned protection factor of 20. That will usually be used for non-licensed and notifiable non-licensed works. There are alternatives with half masks. You can have a half mask reusable rubber style mask that can obviously be wiped down and reused again, or single use disposable masks. A lot of people kind of assume that you just put a mask on and it works. I can assure you that that's not the case. I also do some face fitting here as well. So stressing the importance of choosing the right mask, making sure it fits correctly. Everybody assumes the universal mask will fit everybody. Not the case. So basically going on to face fitting, ensuring that your operatives that are wearing a mask ensure they've been fitted correctly and have a certificate to prove that. So that's something, again, if you're ever considering doing asbestos works, must be done prior to you starting those works, all of your guys face fitted. Regulation 16 is the duty to prevent or reduce the spread of asbestos. So one thing the HSE like to crack the whip essentially on is ensuring that from your workplace that you're not spreading asbestos elsewhere. So that's what we're talking about, the likes of your personal decontamination, making sure you're bagging the waste close to the source and not bagging it at the other end of the site, etc. So they're all things that you would touch on a non-licensed or a licensed course. Enclosures, how to seal enclosures up at certain points in the day, etc. Ensuring that the waste skip is sealed at all times. So basically, that's the one that the HSE insists that you work very, very hard on not spreading it elsewhere. So the approved codes of practice, so they were all regulations we've just looked at. These next ones, guys, are approved codes of practice. So there is a book that you can buy. It's called the HSE Asbestos Essentials. You can also download that from the HSE website. If you guys are likely going to be doing any type of asbestos works, I'd highly recommend for you to go online and have a look at it. If you go to the HSE website and type in HSE Asbestos Essentials, that will bring you to, it's basically your approved codes of practice on how to remove your non-licensed items. So the likes of your roof sheets, the likes of your gutters, your downpipes, etc. Obviously with a bit of training and this guidance, it's an easy way for you and operatives to ensure that everything is being done by the book. So highly recommend you download that or even buy a copy for the office. It's a good source of information to have to ensure that you're following all the regulations and approved codes of practice. So you'll see it here in a second. I'll just get it here. So with this one here, it's the Asbestos Essentials Task Manual, HSG 210. So any of you that are working with asbestos regularly, I would highly recommend either buy it or go online and download it. And you can print it obviously as well. That will go through things like personal decontamination, how to bag waste, how to remove certain products like gutters, downpipes, ensuring you're doing it by the book basically. So key source of information. If you are keen, I would definitely try and get onto that one, guys. Right, we're going to look at asbestos containing materials. So 15 minutes, so we're going to have to kind of rattle through this as quick as we can. So we're going to look at our most dangerous, which is our loose fill insulation. We're going to work down to our reinforced products. So in terms of risk, guys, we're talking most risk is our loose insulation. And as I said, as we come down, the risk is severely reducing, okay? So loose fill insulation, this is typically what it looks like. It's a gray or a blue color. You will find it not very often. Usually if there's any guys in Belfast and you're working close to the docks and Newtonards Road, etc., be on the lookout around there. There's quite a few of it we would find in surveys in houses, usually in roof spaces. The theory was guys were basically coming home from Harlett and Wood shipyard on a daily basis and taking a little handful of it home with them every day, putting it into the roof space to insulate their loft, etc. So you will occasionally find it in little random places, roof voids. But yeah, that is highly, highly unlikely you're going to come up against it, but be on the lookout for anything that basically looks very similar to your triple MF. It's usually in a powdery form, and it's usually a grey or a blue colour. So just be on the lookout for that, guys. Highly, highly, highly friable. There's a high concentration of asbestos within that. Coming down, our next one is our spread coatings. Again, this stuff is usually applied to undersides of factory roofs, steel beams, any structural parts to a building. Famously, it was used in the Twin Towers in 9/11. All of those beams, etc., were spread within the Twin Towers, hence why there was a huge asbestos exposure during that tragedy in the early 2000s. So again, be on the lookout for this. It's usually fluffy in appearance. It can have a trowel finish, so it can have a smooth finish. So sometimes, guys, it looks very similar to a cement finish. So if you're ever unsure and you're potentially going to be drilling through or doing any work surrounding it, make sure you have it sampled and analysed first. So that's what it can look like. Just another photo of it, but I said don't be fooled by that image. Sometimes it can be trowel finished. So thermal insulation, this is what most people will refer to as pipe lagging. As you can see, sections of pipe on the left-hand side, preformed sections dubly clipped on around the pipe, as you can see here. On the right-hand side, not so pleasant on the eye. This was usually hand-installed thermal insulation. So what the guys were doing back in the day, they were basically at a bucket of whatever calcified product they were putting onto their pipes. They would have wrapped chicken wire around it. They would have put horsehair, and they were mixing their asbestos with the calcified products and basically hand applying it to the pipes. So again, if you're working around pipe work and boiler rooms, roof voids, etc., be careful of walls, floors, and ceilings. If you see anything that looks very dodgy looking on a wall, kind of step away and have it analysed before you do anything. So most of the time, guys, you're going to find that as a pipe lagging. You'll also find it on boilers, calorifiers, pressure vessels, etc. But the main area will be your pipes. So that's it on a larger scale, an industrial scale, large sections within a factory. Again, on the left-hand side, you can see that is debris that has fallen from a pipe, and on the right-hand side, you can see a boiler which has been painted with thermal insulation. So these are all licensable products, guys. These are, remember, you don't touch any of this stuff unless you are trained to do so. Right, we're coming into our last of our licensable products. So this is our AIB. AIB is Asbestos Insulating Board. Where could you find this? The easiest way to say it, guys, is anywhere where you could potentially find a plasterboard in a building. So you think where you can find that, pretty much anywhere. This was used in the same way, pretty much as plasterboards, walls, ceilings. You'll get canopy covers, undersides of canopies, etc. Fire break panels, you'll get them as drip trays in roof voids underneath water tanks, etc. So this one is the one that you potentially are going to come up against a lot. So just be on the lookout for any types of boards that look suspect. Remember, we want to touch at the very end on what you should do if you do come up against some of these. Okay, coming into our middle category of notifiable non-licensed work. So remember, we said our red section was our licensed work. This middle section essentially is a non-licensed product, but potentially has been broken, disturbed, damaged, maybe a fire damaged building. So therefore it goes up a category from non-licensed, and you must notify this to the HAC before you leave or before you remove it. So asbestos paper can be found in various different places, guys. Asbestos paper you will sometimes find on the undersides of tiles, floor tiles, lino. You can also find it underneath pipe lagging, also as acting as a water vapor, or for insulation purposes, sorry. The paper you would find on your tiles underneath lino, etc. in kitchens is there as a water protection, stops vapor coming through into the kitchen, etc. So just be on the lookout for any suspect paper that's potentially on tiles, lino, pipes, etc. Just be on the lookout. And again, if you're unsure, stop works, report it, and get it sampled. Ropes and yarns, so these are mainly chrysotile based. So remember from the start, white asbestos, chrysotile. Remember we said we could weave it easily into fabric or into clothing products. So there you can see ropes, you can see gloves, oven mitts, etc. So again, you're going to find those old aga cookers, oven doors. You'll sometimes find them around there. Sometimes you'll find them around skylights. Again, so just be very, very careful. Usually this stuff is 100% chrysotile asbestos. So there is a few firemen back in the day. All of their suits would have been made from 100% chrysotile. So there you can see them getting their suit fittings done. Okay, gaskets and washers. Again, you're going to know where these can pop up, usually sandwiched between pieces of pipework, etc. Friction products, old brake plates and clutch plates, etc. in old vehicles, old lifts, etc. in old buildings. You would sometimes have asbestos brakes in the lifts. So again, if you're ever working in any older buildings with lifts, etc., be on the lookout for these boys. Right, coming into our non-licensed category. I'm kind of conscious for time here, guys, so I'm just winging through these. So our cement profile sheets, I'm sure at some stage you've came across these, you've seen them somewhere. Farms around the north of Ireland, you're going to see these everywhere. Farmers tend to use these. Be careful, guys, if you're going out potentially maybe looking at removing this stuff. Sometimes they can be, so if you're sizing it up from inside, you have 400 meters squared or whatever it is, essentially you could have 800 meters squared. So ensure you're checking, is it double skinned? This is mainly chrysotile based, so that's our white asbestos. So other forms of asbestos cement, you can see on the left hand side we have a lab benchtop, so remember, resistant to chemicals. We would have used these a lot of the time. On the right hand side we have an asbestos ironing board plate, so they used to be made from asbestos cement. Some fully compressed board, you can see some tongue and groove, etc. Cladding, not so popular in the north. England, I would say they're probably more popular over the water. Some molded products, so we can see some flues on the left hand side. Usually our asbestos cement is that battleship greyish kind of colour, so traditionally it usually looks that colour. Moving on to textured coatings, guys. Textured coatings, a lot of people will refer to it as Artex. Artex would have been the brand name before it was banned in '88. Yeah, it's usually a stipple or a swirl type decorative coating, usually applied to a ceiling. Sometimes you can find it on walls, etc., but traditionally you're going to find it on ceilings. Okay, moving into our bitumen products. Here you can see a flat roof with asbestos bitumen. Again, we're now towards the bottom of our work categories chart. So in terms of concentration of asbestos, it's a lot lower from the likes of our pipe lagging, etc. So very, very small concentration bound together with a bitumen, basically, that's making it very, very impossible for that fibre to escape. Other bitumens, you will find damp-proof courses, low-level brickwork, you'll find it. You'll also find it on the acoustic pads underneath sinks, etc. You can see it applied to those. So that's other ways in which bitumen can be used. It's also used as an adhesive to put these boys down. So these are asbestos floor tiles. I'm sure these have put a halt to a few jobs in the past. They're usually a pain in the arse because they're usually hidden under about 3 layers of lino or something, and then you have to stop your works to get rid of them. These tiles are very, very brittle. Traditionally, they've got this stripe, this pattern, guys, so it's usually like a tiger stripe, as they call it. They can come in every weird and wonderful color you can think of, so just be on the lookout. If you see those, again, stop works, ensure that you report it, and have it sampled. Once you know that it is asbestos, ensure that it's removed by the correct person and disposed of. And on the right hand side, you can see the bitumen adhesive used to basically stick those down. Bottom of the list, guys, we have a reinforced plastic and resin composite. So virtually impossible for this asbestos fibre to escape, bound together with a heavy, thick bakelite usually, or a plastic composite. You will find these in lights, outside lights. You'll sometimes see a black trim around security lights. You'll find them in toilet cisterns, toilet seats, and it's usually that thick, heavy black plastic that it is in. Okay, so that is our products, guys. I'm going to just skim through these next photos because we've only 5 minutes left, so I just need to get to our what to do if something goes wrong, basically. So I'm sure if Roger asked, we could send over a PDF copy of this PowerPoint for you to look through all these products. Okay, so we're just slightly running behind on time, so we'll go to our emergency procedures. So what should I do if I suspect asbestos materials are present? So I've kind of touched on this a few times. Remember, there's only a risk if asbestos fibers are made airborne. This can happen when asbestos materials are damaged or disturbed. If you see a material which you have reason to believe contains asbestos, it has been damaged, and you believe there is a serious risk of exposure to fibers, you should ask everybody to leave the area. But remember not to create more of a risk to people, for example, causing a panic or leaving something in an unsafe condition. So briefly going to look at this again. So remember, we said our licensable materials are very, very dangerous materials. And in terms of risk, a lot less risk, still very dangerous, still have to be treated the same. But what we're going to say in this next statement is, remember that minor damage to some materials does not always mean that there is a serious risk or that immediate evacuation of the area is warranted. So for example, minor damage to a material securely bound in a matrix. So these are our non-licensed securely bound in a matrix materials. So basically, to give you an example, if you were to get a piece of asbestos cement roof sheets, those corrugated sheets, and maybe a small piece fell into a factory floor or something, if you had a small piece of a cement, even that size, in terms of risk, very, very low, okay? Remember that that fiber is bound together with a cement. So in terms of evacuating the full factory because of a small piece of asbestos cement is probably uncalled for. So again, using your knowledge, understanding, obviously if you're trained to remove it, go over, wet it down, put it in an asbestos bag, have your mask on obviously, and dispose of it. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, if you were to go into a building and there was a potential AIB roof panel and it was smashed all over the floor, that would warrant closing that door, lock it, report it to somebody, whether the client or whoever it is, your supervisor. That must be sampled through UCAS lab. Once that's been analysed and sampled, report it to the client, and then the client will basically follow up on getting it removed. So basically risk assess in your head, guys. I know we've went through those pretty quick, but remember the likes of your insulations, your loose fill insulation, your spread insulation, your AIB boards, etc. It's all of those really nasty stuff and your pipe lagging that you would be stopping, locking the area, reporting it straight away. Obviously, with your other materials, the likes of your roof sheets, cement products, bitumen, floor tiles, still must be reported to somebody, still must be cleaned up. But in terms of evacuating the building, it's probably a bit over the top for that, okay? So in any case, you should notify the employer or occupier immediately. No further work should be take place until the area is safe. So that means that action appropriate to the risk has been taken. What to do if you uncover or damage asbestos? Stop work immediately. Decide who must do the work. You may need a licensed contractor. Minimize the spread of contamination to other areas. Keep exposures as low as you can and clean up the contamination. So don't allow anybody into the area. Lock a door if you potentially can. Put warning signs up, no entry signs up, and then figure out who needs to do the cleanup. So avoiding the risks of asbestos before commencing work. Establish if the building has been identified with asbestos in it. So if you're doing any works in a building, ensuring you, when you're signing in, that you're checking the asbestos register. By you signing that asbestos register to say you've acknowledged it, is basically the onus is over on you now. So ensure before you do any works, ask, is there asbestos present? If there is, can you see the register so that you can basically identify where it is? If it has been identified, make sure you know where it is and seek advice on the precautions needed to be taken. If the building has not been checked, assume that you might encounter asbestos during the works and be on the lookout for suspect materials. If you subsequently find any building material or dust you suspect may contain asbestos, stop work and seek advice. As we said, all samples must be sent to a UCAS accredited lab, okay? Okay, guys, apologies, that was really quick. Hopefully you took something from the session. As we said at the start, if there's any questions, fire them into the chat box or ask Roger, and I'm sure we could go through them. So I can hand you back over, Roger.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Appreciate that. There's one just quickly to clarify, which somebody sent me a message of, and I think I know the answer, but you'll clarify first. Obviously, you mentioned the regulations there, and the screenshot you put up was the Northern Ireland regulations, but they're the same throughout the UK, aren't they? In Northern Ireland, we just put NI.
Yep, we changed the word from act to order, because we're slightly awkward here in the north, but yes, they're the same regulations. Yeah. Or the same laws, yeah.
Yep. So, just on that, you know, folks, if you are, whenever you're quoting anything in any of your coursework, those of you who are based in Northern Ireland, you can quote the Northern Ireland regulations. Those of you based in GB, it is the control of asbestos regulations. You just drop out the NI from it. So in terms of all of the slides that Stephen put up with the actual regulations on it, they are identical word for word, no matter what part of the UK you're working in. So that was the only chat one that came through to me, folks. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to ask just when they've got Stephen on here? Just remember to unmute yourself. Brian, was up? Nope, we just waving bye-bye.
Oh, no, I'm fine. So.
Sorry, yep. Okay, so anybody else got a question then when Stephen's here? All good? Okay, so Stephen, we will obviously put a copy of your presentation up on the course website, and Stephen's details are on the presentation as well if anybody wants to follow up with that. Okay, well, thanks very much, Stephen.
No problem.
Thanks everybody. Good to see you all signing in again this morning, and I hope to see as many of you can then again next Wednesday at 10 o'clock. Okay.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, Stephen.
Have a good weekend. Cheers.